Today I'm just talking about how I feel about my alcoholic father. Welcome back, and if this is the first time that you've been here, look, I talk about my emotions, my feelings, and some of my traumas, and how I try to thrive in my life in spite of some of that. So I'd really like for you to stick around and subscribe and turn on the notifications so you know each and every time I post a video. So look, today I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I feel about my dad in my life today. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, I lost my dad when I was 9 years old to alcoholism, and the reality is that as a 32-year-old man today, I really don't remember much of the good stuff. But I do also remember having an understanding that when I looked at him, that knowing that this was a reaction to something, and knowing that in some way my dad was poorly or ill, and kind of sensing that I never really spent time with the real him. So there was a knowing of that too. For a lot of my life, until I found Nakoa, for a lot of my life I would always just say that my dad was a good man who sometimes drank too much. Now, I also believe this to be true to some degree until, you know, his drinking got really bad. Because people that I trust and people that knew him tell me, you know, how much of a good man my dad was. But I don't remember that, okay? And also, as a way of protecting myself from some of the painful truths and some of my actual realities, I would kind of over big up my dad, yeah? So I would talk about him being this great man who I remember who was really funny and all of these things. Now, some of them might be true, but I don't remember that. But I used to say that to protect myself, and I would have this kind of over compassionate feeling for him because I didn't want to spend any time with the pain, and I didn't want to spend any time with the difficult truths around my dad and his drinking, right? And I had buried them. What that meant is that when I spent time with people that were more open to some of the more difficult feelings around their parent, I would actually try to push them towards feeling like I did, because I didn't want to spend time with the difficult stuff. I think it's really important also to point out that lots of people have parents who are alcoholic and are really bad people at their core. And I don't think we should start trying to compare where you are on your healing journey. I've heard that kind of spiritual pride thing where people think that if you're in a place where you haven't forgiven your parent, then you need to do more work. Like you should have to forgive your parent. I do not believe that to be true, okay? I don't believe anybody has a right to forgiveness. And actually, I think you have your right to not forgive. And that doesn't reflect on where you are in your healing. I know lots of people who are in an amazing place and stage of their healing from their childhood who don't and never will forgive their parent, okay? So I'm not one that buys into this fantasy of forgiveness, right, being the key to everything, and that if you don't forgive, then you're somehow hurting yourself. I don't believe that to be true in all cases. And actually, on the flip side of that, I forgive my dad in a compassionate way, and I still recognize the pain in which his drinking and his alcoholism caused on me. It's really, really important when we're talking about the ways that we feel, I think, about our parents. And this is both parents, by the way. You know, whether you only had one alcoholic parent or not, both parents, right? We need to be able to validate and explore all of the ways that we feel when it comes to how we feel about our alcoholic parents. What I mean by that is that I know that everyone involved in the situation when I was younger was doing their best, and I also recognized that quite often, or sometimes at least, that best wasn't good enough. Now, I can say that with no betrayal, no judgment, and with compassion. So I can understand where my parents' actions let me down, and I can understand why they reached that point and how they got to a stage where their actions let me down, and still recognize the pain that it caused me. We need to understand that black and white thinking is a coping mechanism to avoid spending time with the vulnerability in between. So I do have a compassionate approach when I talk about my dad and the way that he drank. I know that he was a good man because I've been told that. I understand what he was in his earlier years. I can see his story. I can understand how he got to where he is. And I'm still allowed to be angry about it, right? So when I am traumatized by somebody else, regardless of whether I have compassion for how they got to a stage where they caused that trauma on me or not, is irrelevant, okay? And then it doesn't become betrayal, and it's not bad of me to recognize that trauma and I can recognize it with compassion. There's this thing where people think that if somehow by admitting the pain that's been caused by somebody's actions, that you're somehow kind of putting them down in a way. And the two can be mutually exclusive, okay? So you can understand the pain that it caused and recognize and have compassion for how it got there. And also, again, just to validate the flip side of it, right? You can recognize the pain, have compassion, and still reach the judgment, or not the judgment, but reach the idea that you don't want to forgive. So in summary, if I'm talking about how I feel now about my dad, I've reached a place where, you know, I have lots of compassion for the man that he was. I have lots of compassion for how he reached the stage he did, and he will, you know, he will always be my dad. I will always love him, and I think, you know, I will always view him as the dad in my life. So to conclude, I guess what I'm saying is that I have mixed emotions, right? And mixed emotions doesn't show that I'm like kind of struggling to understand it. It shows that it's a complex situation and that I'm allowed to have mixed emotions. I think we need to make sure that we validate all feelings. We shouldn't try to impose our own needs and wants and internal struggles onto other people, and I think that happens a lot because we're trying to learn our best ways to cope. So today's just been more about laying out my feelings out there, really, more so than anything else, and I hope some people can have taken some things from that. I have had some requests or videos to do, and I'm going to do them in the future, so they will come in, and I appreciate you listening. Give us a like if you think this has been helpful, and I'll see you next week.